evening. Welcome to the Supervisory Union Board meeting. And I'm going to make a motion to move into executive session for the purposes of discussing personnel matters, including succession planning, an arbitration case, teacher negotiations, a district-to-district contract, off-contract SVSU employee compensation, and the interim superintendent search.
I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion, we go into executive session.
Okay, Cindy seconded. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
George? Okay.
Did you talk to people?
Angie got, yeah, Annie's all for
Tell
it.
him he's gonna
Yeah.
do it.
Yes, I just did.
All for it, I'm all for it. Angie thought maybe we should go in and talk to him.
Okay, I need a motion to come out of executive session into open session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, all right.
I
George?
would like to make a motion to appoint Jim Culkeen as SVSU interim superintendent of the schools beginning July 1, 2014.
Second?
Okay. All those in favor? Okay, abstentions? Okay. Anyone else?
Were there 2 extensions?
Do that again, the abstentions? Okay, there we go. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Kendra, take care.
Okay, next we will enter into public comments. Is there any public comments? Lori?
Hi there, good evening. Welcome to Jim Polkey. I also wanted to address 2 things on the, one may be on the regular agenda. One is 5C, the air conditioning system. I just had one question for Rick. The other question I had was in regards to oh good, it would be nice if I had my information down. I thought it was on the consent agenda. Let me just, I'm sorry, I
Go
lost
ahead,
my
take your
train of
time.
thought. Oh, yes, now I know what it was. Sorry. It's actually still on the regular agenda. It was in regards to link, number 4, link 1, 2, and 3. I just asked that, there's some documents attached that are undated, and when they're revised, it would be helpful if the SVSU would put a date on them, because
Sure.
one of the documents mentions Kathy Buck, and I know that it's updated since then, since we have
Well,
Wendy Pierce
actually-
available, and I didn't know if that's still the same.
Actually, Kathy Buck's name would still remain on that page because she was part of that committee, as was Jim Harwood. So that report was just saying who was in that committee that did the basic work 3 years ago. This
Right.
committee
But
started
has the
3 years
document been updated since then?
only with
Because I saw Common Core in there, so the reason why I ask is because the document doesn't have any date.
Yeah,
So-
okay, so I appreciate the dating, your suggestion about dating. We can
Just
do
that current, if there are current
Yes.
members, that they be listed also, and
Yep.
that the document be dated.
Yep,
And I
Thank
don't know
you.
if you want me to wait
for the air
on
conditioning.
that air conditioning thing,
Why don't you,
or if I could just ask it really quick.
well, I would suggest you ask the question, and I'll incorporate the answer into
That sounds
the
fine.
joint presentation that Karen and I do on it. Is that
Okay.
okay?
Yep, that's fine.
That's great. My question is, in the air conditioning system bid, I just happened to notice the exact price was the exact amount of bid. That was one thing that I'm sure everyone can see. The other question I had for you is that I noticed that it was a roof system, and not that it's really terribly right up my alley, but I was just wondering if alternate systems were considered, such as like a split system, like a Mitsubishi split system, which is used over at Central. The other thing is that the funding source, because the wording used as to the funding source reflects a .45 FTE was SLP position was not filled, and there was this explicit mention of a lack of candidates. Not that it was unnecessary, and my concern is that we're shifting funds from perhaps prevention of special ed or special ed over to air conditioning. So that was my concern. So if you want to address that in the,
We will.
That would be great.
Karen and I will jointly address that.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right, so you want to do the,
Teacher evaluation, sure.
okay. Next is the teacher evaluation.
Thank you, Fran. I'm very pleased to present to you tonight the revision of the teacher evaluation system. This is a system that has needed revision for a number of decades. We had a very old system that had been in place for many, many years. And the revision actually has started several times over the past decade. In fact, there was a committee of extensive work just prior to my appointment, and then as the change in administration to an interim superintendent occurred, it was dropped, and when I was appointed, I brought it forward again, asking Pamela Burke, who's the consultant with the NEASC accreditation leadership teams, to come and facilitate a process with the teachers and administrators to update that system and bring it in to modern times, I'll say, because there are changes that are more in line with programs that the state Department of Ed and Agency of Education have approved, and also there is currently an Agency of Education requirement to have teacher evaluation systems revised and brought into compliance with their guidelines in the next few years. So we're ahead of that game and ready to begin. I'd like to introduce Katie Schoenbeck to tell us a little bit about the process and the system itself. Thank you, Katie.
So I think I'm here mostly to answer questions, and I will do a little bit of an overview, but I'm capable of reading, I know. So, and there's a pretty thick document. One suggestion that I have is that you may not get all your questions answered this evening, and so as things come up, to just send Catherine or Jim an email, and maybe you'd like to have us come back and answer those specific questions. The committee that I was part of, that I just realized started working almost 3 years ago, was that correct?
3 years ago.
Consisted of teachers and administrators alike, so there were a lot of voices around the table, looking at what we had currently in place and what was making sense moving forward. We spent a lot of time looking at other systems of evaluation, so looked at what Massachusetts was doing, looked at a system in New Hampshire, and looked at what we were doing here already in the SVSU to try to figure out, well, what was going to work the best in terms of helping students' learning improve, since that's our bottom line. We eventually decided on using a Danielson model, which was similar to what we have in place and really lined up with what the state was expecting. So we took the state's list of, you must be doing this with your teacher evaluation, Danielson, and put them into one big container, shook it up and said, okay, this makes sense, let's rewrite this a little bit, and cleared it up. And that is what this, with all of my writing on it, ended up looking like. So that's what you have. The system is still pretty similar to our old system in the cycling of things. So there is a first year where you're on observation by an administrator as a teacher, and then the following 2 years you're on a self-evaluation year. We decided it was important to beef it up a little bit, the off observation years, to make them more specific. So we have a list of professional development options that a teacher could choose from. But in terms of reporting out, there's some more accountability around all of that. So if it's my off year, I have to write at the beginning of the year what I propose to do, submit it to my principal, Sue McGuire. Sue and I sit down and talk about it, and Sue says, yes, this makes sense. Let's move forward with that. And then throughout the year, I'm required to collect evidence that, yes, I'm doing what I said I was going to do. And then at the end of the year, I write up a little report. Here's what I did. Here's what I learned. And Sue and I meet again to say, yep, this makes sense. What do you want to do for next year? So it has a little bit more concreteness, I think, to it than it had before, at least from my perspective. Okay, this is what I'm expected to do and how I'm expected to show that I did what I acceptance.
The evidence is really important, and that's a key addition to this, is having the evidence and more emphasis on principal involvement in the off year and looking at goals that actually connect to school plans, school improvement plans, action plans as well.
One of the places that we aren't done yet in our committee work has to do with having forms for non-regular ed teachers, so librarians, school nurses, special educators, and I defer to you to explain a little bit about those forms.
So Becky Salzville is here to.
Actually, we haven't designed those forms yet. Our committee, we're hoping to design or create additional forms to use with people like special educators, librarians, maybe Title I, the school nurse, positions that don't quite fit into the evaluation model. And they would be used in conjunction with that model and address other job responsibilities, for example.
Becky, may I, they fit in the model of the, but not the forms. The forms are
Correct.
not conducive to their role.
To their role, yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
For example, special educators, yes, they do deliver instruction. However, they also have other responsibilities, working with parents. They have paperwork compliance, things like that that don't quite fit into that evaluation tool that we would like to add to. So we design those forms and use them in conjunction with what we're asking you to endorse tonight.
Thank you. Also, before we have questions about the evaluation system, I just wanted to emphasize that although the basic committee work in developing the rubrics that guide in the observation process was done 3 years ago, we did actually plan for the following year to be a piloting year. So the year before this year, last year, was piloted in all of the schools, and we had feedback from teachers and principals as we met with union leadership this year to make a few edits before we brought it to you for approval. And so the collective bargaining agreement requires that the board adopt the basic system of teacher evaluation, and that is after the union leadership has been involved, which they were this year. So it's been a thorough process over 3 years. We will also be giving an orientation. We could call it a reorientation for principals every single year in the fall, as well as the teachers, so that everyone is rooted to a consistency of use. Also, I believe, Katie, the rating scales in the observations themselves are new to this model from the previous model that we were using. So people are actually being marked on proficiency or need of improvement. And it's also in this system much more relevant and easy to put someone on an improvement plan if there are areas that are unsatisfactory. So that has become more clear in this new model. So we're hoping you'll support it. Fran, if there were any questions, we have Frank Barnes here as well, who's on the committee, and Katie and Becky.
George, just a effective when, Catherine?
Well, we've been piloting it for 2 years. We'll continue on. So it's been in effect for 2 years as a pilot while we tweaked forms and got feedback from principals and teachers. So it's in process right now.
So if this is approved by the supervisory union tonight,
It will be formal.
when would it, what is the next step?
The next step is that we will all be bound to use it beginning July 1.
And the bargaining unit for the teachers have already accepted this?
Mm-hmm. They don't formally accept it. They participate in the work of editing it.
It doesn't, it's not a...
They have to have an opportunity to be involved in the development and give comment, which they have done.
Doesn't need approval. Okay, thank you very much.
Ray?
So you've been listing ways in which it differs from the current or
The former.
passing away.
Former.
That's one of the things that was sort of lacking in the materials that I looked over?
Oh, the changes?
Yeah. You're making it seem as if those changes aren't that large.
That are,
That those changes aren't that large?
Actually, I think they are. I think you were
Okay,
saying
well,
that
then that's
I
a
think-
good question then,
Yeah,
because
it's
it
a great
elicits a
question.
different reaction than I thought.
the
So
cycle.
from my perspective, the changes aren't, from my perspective, teaching at the high school, the changes don't seem all that large because we've been following a Danielson-like model for a number of years. So for me, it's tweaking and having a rubric that I can look at to say, oh, I want to be the A teacher, I don't want to be the B+ teacher, what are the things that I can do to improve my practice? So for me, they're pretty subtle, but like specific, oh, I could do these things. I think for other school buildings in the SVSU, it is more of a change.
I see
So-
it as a big change,
It
actually.
is a
I
big change.
see it as a positive growth model for teachers. I see it as being flexible enough to be more student-centered, and
The
to
evidence.
use for a lot of growth for teachers that might need that, or might need some help.
So I think the similarity is the cycle of pre-conference observation, post-conference observations, a second observation, and then the summative evaluation, and just the continuous cycle of that going, and then the off years where there's a setting of their own goals, but now involves the principal, whereas before it was totally done in isolation. Now it's done with the principal. So that's new. The evidence gathering is new. The clarity of when someone's put on an improvement plan is new, basically, as far as the procedure of how to do it. The evidence that's being given. And yes, the high school has been using a rubric and Danielson Model, I think, for 4 years. So they were actually one of the first. North Bennington also used 3 years ago a Danielson Model. So this brings a requirement, George, that everyone will use the same system. It's taken the best of everything we can research at this time.
So at a place like the high school or the middle school where you have a concentration of teachers, who are the administrators who are involved in this evaluation process? Because this actually is a fairly extensive amount of their time.
It is, but it's streamlined from the old system in that it's two observations rather than 3, with more emphasis on the pre-conference and post-conference. So there's actually more practice reflection being done with the administrators. So the people that are able to evaluate at the schools are the principals and assistant principals. So at the middle school, it would be Tim Payne, Mary Ellen Breen, and Tony Lee. At early childhood, we have special education directors who would be available and able to do those evaluations. Wendy Pierce, as a director of special ed holding that certification, can do a third observation if a principal felt that they wanted an additional eye in an observation of their special ed staff. These superintendents and assistant superintendent can go in to assist with evaluation, but it's predominantly the principals and the special ed directors and those that hold those licenses that are the evaluators. For example, at the middle school, they have a head teacher and some team leaders. They are not administrative positions, do not require administrative certification. They would not be evaluating.
But for them to do an effective evaluation on practice, teacher practice and pedagogy, it seems to me that there's a heavy requirement on them to know something about the children in those classes and where they are, and because part of it is responding to individuals and effective
That's right.
response to individuals.
I would say a lot of that occurs in the pre-conferences of the observations, and at the middle school, where one of the concerns is because of the number of people being evaluated, the administrators also go to the team meetings, and so they're very familiar with the team's approach academically and behaviorally with the students. So there is some familiarity there, but the kind of in-depth familiarity would come in the pre-conference and having done the observation and then going over that. We are moving to personalized learning plans as required by the state, and there'll even be more documentation that would help a principal. We have data teams in the buildings that Also look at achievement data that the principals hopefully are using when they sit down with the teachers with their evidence of student achievement that they can use to look at the students individually.
I have one other thing, because but since Katie's here again, I can't let her get away without asking her exactly in what way this is rigorous. And the correlation of that is to the Common Core, because one of these documents mentioned an alignment with the Common Core, and I'm wondering how this evaluation can be said to align with Common Core.
I love this. It's gonna be our repartee for several years to come, this rigor conversation. The rigor comes totally from these rubrics. So rigor in this case, I think, for example, growing and developing professionally, and then there are the 4 different categories. Not only is it describing what growing, developing, and developing professionally means. Teacher participates actively in professional development activities and contributes to the profession, but then it gives specific ways that what it could look like. So it's not just, oh, yes, Katie, you are a 4. What the heck is a 4? What does that even mean? So in terms of rigor, it's being the language is much more specific. This is what we mean by what we used to call a 4. This is proficient. You want to be the A+, do these things. So I think that's my rigor response for today.
Yep.
Work on that.
And I think it's consistent with the previous one.
Yes, isn't it? Isn't it just?
That's a good thing, Katie.
Leon?
And the second part of your question, what's the connection with Common Core? The connection to Common Core was made by the state, who gave us in-task standards to use to develop teacher evaluation language with.
Now, well, I monopolize this, and I didn't really want to do that, but the section on the Common Core, there's a mention of the Gates Foundation and research that they must have sponsored, showing a correlation between high evaluation marks on this instrument and student achievement. We don't have this data, it's just alluded to. Now, is this going to end up being, if your children don't achieve at an improved level, is this going to end up being what do I want to say, a marker for...
Yeah, black mark.
a marker for lack of what are the levels on this thing?
Proficiency.
Yeah, I mean, you've got basically they're very comparable to the exams we give children. No evidence of achievement, some evidence of achievement, meets the standard and excels, right? Basically, it's essentially the same thing, just applied to teachers.
Yeah.
It's similar, except that there's not a test that one has to take.
Well,
I think
we should
Katie,
be looking at that for kids too.
And we are, and that's part of what the conversation at the state level is right now, in terms of this is what Secretary Holcomb has been talking a lot about, that we can't use a test to decide whether or not our kids can read and write and do math. It's not helpful.
her term is balanced accountability, a balanced accountability system, and she's actually saying that one of the things that Vermont has stepped away from under No Child Left Behind mandates is the original look at the whole child, the physical, PE, the arts, and areas such as those that we really need to pay more attention to as well. And so she's looking at a more balanced accountability model. And to answer your question more specifically, principals a number of years ago had training in what's called academic conferencing, where they learned how to take student data and talk with teachers specifically about the instructional methods and whether they were actually reaching the children for their achievements. So what we find in this system and others as they're developing now is that the emphasis isn't on what the teacher's doing, it's what the student is doing in the classroom when the administrator goes in to observe. And is the student engaged? Is the student understanding what the lesson is.
That's pretty clear in some of the modules of this evaluation.
So I think that's really important. It's a shift from focusing on a teacher performance to actually engagement of the student in the work and practice of the teacher in teaching. So I think it's an improvement. I think it was Leon and then
yeah.
So,
George.
that was, similar. I thought it was pretty, unless I got it wrong, that the current system, the system before this was pretty frustrating in terms of how to administer that, to manage the rotation of the evaluation and so forth along that line. So I'm wondering, what have we made in terms of change? It sounds like you still got three phases in here.
Well,
So
two observations rather than three, which gives the principals more time to work in the pre-conference and the post-conference in the application of what they're seeing.
So-
And then the summative. So people, they're also on a cycle, so that they're on a 3-year cycle. So Katie could probably explain it better than I, but the faculty are divided up into those 3 years. So you're not evaluating everybody every year.
But an individual is what I think the individual won't get looked at every so often. I mean, it's not 3 consecutive years, it's by the same person, so you get one, but if I got it wrong, it used to be one the principal, one somebody else, and one somebody else along that line doing
Oh, I think
evaluation
we've
and
changed.
rotation, so
Yeah,
I'm trying to
we've
make.
changed from that.
It was really frustrating
Yes.
to understand, and by the time you came back around to the person that did the original that had issues.
Yeah, no, I
You know-
think exactly to your point, Leon, what this system, what we've done in practice is encourage the same evaluator, especially in clarifying how someone gets put on an improvement plan. It's important that it be consistent. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
My question is, what type of orientation do you contemplate in getting all of this out to the people involved, meaning the teachers?
So that's a great question. At the beginning of the school year at the high school, that was part of our orientation. This is our new document. Here are people in the building that you can go to talk to. Here's an overview. The forms are the same as what we did before, except for these things. And I'm assuming that similar kinds of orientations happen in the other buildings, and that's something that we want to continue to do. So it won't be, okay, now we've done that, we're done, thank you very much, but every year. Oh yes, here's our document, let's remember how we're going to be using it, and not only for the teaching staff, but also for the principals as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, okay. We're gonna need a motion to approve the revised teacher evaluation system for 2014 as presented.
So moved. Who moved it?
Very good.
Second.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie and Becky. Great.
Okay. All right, we're into.
Back, Ray.
I'm sorry.
What?
Katie, I might, since we're focused on Katie right now, congratulations on your nomination to the Teacher of the Year competition, and we wish you well in that. We hope you're selected. Thank you for
Okay.
doing the application.
It's really rigorous. I don't know.
Okay, we're into finance. Treasurer's report. Any questions on that? I need to accept the report, I need a
So
motion.
moved.
Second.
Cindy, second. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Next up is the VISBIT VHI Medical and Dental Programs.
Yeah, all of you have seen this at your local boards. This is the last group. It has to take action on this. The board needs to authorize my signature on this in order for you to continue to offer your staff benefits through the VHI program, of which is outlined in the collective bargaining agreement that you have to do anyway. So it's a formality that needs to take place.
So I need a motion to.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'll read it anyway. To authorize the Chief Financial Officer, Rick Pembroke, to sign the Visbit, VHI Medical and Dental Agreements for 2014-15
So
on behalf of the
moved.
boards, okay. And Cindy, did you second it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. All right, air conditioning systems bid.
Hopefully, you all received the information sheet in the packet. As you can see, we're looking to put air conditioning into the Division Street property. I'll let Karen speak to the necessity of that, or the reason we're doing that.
First off, the spaces that we use at Molly Stark School are air conditioned. We do provide summer services for children. We also have a licensing regulation to keep our temperature, both looking at how cool and how warm the rooms get. In addition, we have children with some health risks, so the air conditioning supports their health and safety while they're in school. We have one portion of Division Street that's going to have a server in it that will run hot. It's going to be in a workroom, so we need to have that space air conditioned as well. So there's multiple purposes for the air conditioning in that facility. I want to assure the board that although the funds that we're using were funds that were remaining when we were unable to fill a position for a speech pathologist who resigned in late October, the children have not gone without their intervention. The school, we have kept an open ad on School Spring for a part-time speech pathologist. We have not had viable candidates apply for that, so in order to assure that all children receive their speech and language services, the current 2 speech pathologists that we had, we worked on reorganizing and overfilling their caseloads, so they actually are working extra hours beyond the contract. And we have contracted with a speech and language pathologist locally to fill in the gaps. So we have done everything to assure that children are getting the services per their IEP. But we did not have a candidate to fill a 0.45 position.
And so we talked to a couple of different cooling companies to try to properly size and determine what our best equipment was. We actually looked into the multiple ventless systems that are out on the market, and the forecast was they were going to be more expensive for the project. As you see, we looked at both a 9-ton and a 5-ton system. Different vendors recommended different sizes. We analyzed those difference, talked with both Jim Marsden and Jerry Prue, facility guys we have in the district. And as a result of, especially the early ed, it has multiple movements in and out of the building and the doors opening up and heat loss and cooling loss that are taking place, that it was widely believed that the 9-ton system would be the better system for us to be using. I felt the 5-ton would be a little undersized and thus would be working too hard and burning a lot more electricity. So we're recommending the 9-ton system. We're recommending Bennington Heating and Cooling, which is the low bidder. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Did I answer all your questions?
I have one.
Cindy?
My only concern, I'm not against this, and my only concern is, and I think we had Lori had mentioned this, so we're using the money from the SLP account because we don't have an SLP at the moment?
Well, I think Karen just answered that. Let me answer it in a different way. We lost an SLP mid-year, early portion of the year, and we cobbled together services. This isn't the solely what is left in that account, and that's not solely what we saved in that account. We took a good portion of that account to pay extra money to the other peoples that were working extra hours as well to spend other money. So we got to the end of the year, we're not gonna hire somebody now, we've got the services filled, this is actually money that is available. She doesn't have money available in next year's budget, so this was the logical solution to cover the cost.
All right.
Anybody else? Dave?
Rick, maybe you could only speculate, but why don't the companies, why didn't the other 4 companies put a bid in, 5 companies?
I can only speculate that they didn't want it. I don't know.
And any idea why Hayden didn't bid on the 9-ton?
They're the ones that were strongly recommending the 5-ton. Based on their price on the 5-ton, I'm assuming they wouldn't have been any cheaper on the 9-ton.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure.
Is there anything inherent in the layout of the building that would cause an air conditioning company to be reluctant to do it as far as future performance, something like that?
The 9-ton?
No, just to answer, to get to the question here is, business, why didn't more people bid on it? And I'm asking, do they see something that they're reluctant to get involved with?
Not that the 2 that looked it over didn't see any problems with it whatsoever. So I can only assume no. Either they didn't want to bid it or didn't have the time to do the job, or I don't know. I mean, I'm total speculation, I have no idea.
Right.
I assume this will help maintain good environmental conditions in the space, so that we have, we're doing a good job by children's health and so forth.
That's what's driving it.
Yep.
Okay.
Larry?
Karen, is there any other competitive need for these monies that we're spending in this area? If we didn't spend this, what would happen to these funds?
They would roll in the fund balance.
Yeah,
Okay, so there's no immediate,
no, I would be pretty, it would be limiting, the building would be limiting if we didn't have the air quality that we needed for some of our students to go there. So it's pretty important to me that we have an environment that all children can be included in.
But no, she's not buying desks in order to buy air conditioners. If you didn't do this, it would grow the fund balance.
Yeah, it's pretty high on the priority list.
Lori?
I just have one other question, and that is because of the use of funding. Sometime down the road, I know that we haven't really talked about extended year services and transitional needs yet, because of the Black and Mosaic program. That's usually used to supplement, extended year services for special needs students, but there's also the speech and language needs over the summer. I just want to make sure, and I really want the environment to be appropriate for all students, so I am definitely not trying to prevent this from happening. What I am trying to do is just sort of put a little forethought out there that, okay, what's to happen if, we look and all of a sudden we need additional SLP. This is a huge area that we have been lacking service provision in addition to OT. And not that we've been really proactive about working on a per diem to get these subs in to supplement these areas. So what I don't want to hear in the future is that any students don't receive services because A, we can't find individuals, or B, we don't have the funds.
Yeah. Lori, it's 2 different fiscal years, but Rick will continue the explanation.
Well, it's just the same answer I gave to Larry a different way, that if these monies aren't spent by June 30th, they can't be spent. They have to roll into a fund balance that's going to reduce the assessment 2 years from now. So they can't be used on July 5th for summer services. They're not available.
But we heard your concern, and I'm going to be addressing, I'll be addressing,
I don't want to hear that we don't have money.
Well, no,
Or it's not so that we can't find
that may
funds
still be the case. I
for
mean,
this, when we can find it for air conditioning.
because you're mixing two different connotations, and I got to make sure this is perfectly clear. That if I didn't buy this, and we could very well still say next summer, we don't have any money.
Right. Or that
Has-
we have
has-
difficulty
has-
finding speech pathologists
They're two
because
se- they're,
it's.
they're totally
Separate
they're
fiscal
separate,
years.
they're not linked in any way. They're
So
two
what
separate, they're
you're
two
saying to
separate
me is that
budgets.
You lose the funds if you didn't use them, they use or lose?
They go, yes, basically, yes, because if they're not used, they go back to reduce the assessment in 2016
They lowered the tax rate.
budget, which hasn't been built yet.
And I think what I really want to make sure is clear is that we need to have a building, a facility that is able to include all children despite whether the fact that they have health conditions or not. And so we need a healthy building to be able to educate children in who have health risks. And this is what our goal is.
I also want to say that
Yeah.
these students have health issues too, in the sense that they need speech and they need OT services.
Yeah. We'll be
And
addressing
that
it,
is, again, the
I'm
issue
going
that
to
I wanna
address
make sure
the
happens.
mosaic later in the agenda, and
Well,
then
and also
Wendy and I are
compensatory.
working on summer transitions, and
And
Fran, I think it was
compensatory services.
Dave and
Yeah.
then
Just,
Leon.
are you looking for a motion to transfer funds between accounts as well as to make the purchase?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes, okay.
I was just, before we get to that point, I was trying to make sure I understand the bid process.
The what process?
The bid process and how you came around. And basically, there was a need for air conditioning, and so the bid went out that says, we need to have somebody have bid on setting up air conditioning in this total space and give us your recommendation. And so the logic behind that is that one of the units, which is a 9 versus a 5 or whatever, is to be much more efficient in that space, is what you're saying, is the reason we want that recommendation is going in that direction versus a small one which may be running harder,
Right.
doing something along that particular line. I just wanted to make sure that I got it right before I voted.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, moving on. So I need a motion to award the air conditioning systems bid for 233 Division Street to Bennington Heating and Cooling by approving the appropriate transfer of funds.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Okay, unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, fiscal year 14 supplemental assessments.
Yeah, also in your packet, you'll see that I'm asking for a couple of supplemental assessments in the area of the special ed services that is a direct bill to member districts. So this directly affects only those districts. I have talked to those districts individually in preparation of coming to this meeting with this recommendation. I can't get into a whole lot of detail because of special ed nature and some confidentiality issues. But in short, Woodford is due back a credit because their services were budgeted for significantly higher than they should have been, or to the tune of $11,600. And Mount Anthony owes the SU an additional $95,000 for services that exceeded their prior year budget. Both those boards have been informed. Both of those boards are aware that this one bill and one credit is coming their way. I'll be happy to answer any generic question you may have. Any detail would require us to go into executive session.
Anybody? Okay. So I need a motion to approve SVSU supplemental assessment adjustments to the Woodford and Mount Anthony Union School Districts.
So moved. Second.
That's George, a second. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and district-to-district contract.
Before we move on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to take the opportunity represented by just dealing with an assessment change to request, to make a request.
Okay.
I'm requesting that Rick provided me with some information on potential fund balances in various areas that are assessed, and the administrative fund balance may be as much, I can't say it will be this, because he can't say it, but it might be as much as $64,000, or almost $65,000. And I'm requesting on behalf of my district that a portion of that be applied to North Bennington's administrative assessment for this year. When we had this discussion this year in the FY15 budget discussions, we made a reference to a couple of principles that no district would expect to pay for services it can't receive, and that services are provided either directly to students or in support of students, and where there are no direct services to students, then there can't be administrative oversight for that. North Bennington students, district students, receive no direct services relating to regular education. So in the FY15 budget, the Finance Committee made adjustments to assessments reflecting these principles, I think, and the board agreed with those changes in the assessment scheme which affected North Bennington. We don't see any particular difference in operation between 14 and 15, and we're just requesting that some of this surplus be used to reduce what we feel is not appropriate assessment of administrative costs in North Bennington.
Okay. You all set, Ray?
That's my request, so
Okay.
I guess that's a motion for
Okay.
consideration of that if there is a surplus.
Okay.
In
Rick,
fact,
you comment on that?
Ray's correct. I'm forecasting around a $64,000 surplus in administration. I would request that if this motion is successful, there's a number tied to it. And it's not just an open-ended
yeah, okay.
number. But yeah, I am forecasting certain surpluses in all of our assessment streams. And just so everybody, knows, as I just explained earlier, that any surplus or fund balance in those assessment streams will go to the member districts to reduce their assessments in 2016. So if you reduce those surpluses by reducing North Bennington's assessment this year, which I think is what Ray's asking for, is a supplemental assessment to give North Bennington a credit of some amount. I think I know the amount, but I'll let Ray tell you what it is. That would reduce the amount of surplus available to the member districts in 2016.
But Rick, Ray's request, if approved, could be honored.
To the extent that there's actual surplus.
To the extent that there is that surplus.
Yeah, it won't financially damage the supervisory union, if that's what you mean by honored. It will reduce, it will reduce the fund balance for member districts in 2016, which will increase the cost in 2016.
Go ahead, Dave.
North Bennington is one of those member districts,
Correct.
so its fund balance would, if the status quo is maintained, its fund balance, its share of the fund balance is going to be whatever it is.
3 to 4%.
Well,
Their
I
share.
assume our share of the fund balance would be included in the reduction amount, actually. And what I was looking for was the last assessment, the final assessment payment due to the supervisory union, which was about $27,000. I don't know the specific number there.
Ray, what I'd like to do, and I'll ask Rick, would it be better to do this at the next meeting so we know what the numbers are?
You're closer to them.
Or
we won't
closer
know them
to
exactly.
whatever?
That would be fine with me.
Okay, I mean,
I'm
just-
just bringing it up
No, I
because there was
understand.
an opening here
No,
with
okay.
the assessment discussion.
Okay.
Clarification.
So is that okay with everybody?
Well,
That's
I
great.
think Pownell's gonna jump up next and say something about their.
Well, the thing
reduction,
is,
so that's what I'm
we're
trying to make
different.
sure- I know it, I'm trying to make sure everybody understand, he's wanting, I mean,
We're non-operating.
right, based
That's
on,
the distinction, otherwise we'd have no reason to ask this.
Yeah, Ray and I can,
I
I'm
guess-
assuming, Ray and I can work together and come up with what the motion's gonna be and what it's gonna look like, and then,
Right.
everyone can take action based on factual information in front of them.
Right, I think it would be appropriate at the next meeting.
Ray and I are still
See,
talking
Just
anyway.
bringing it up, and just so everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what we're doing.
Show us
And that-
numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, Ray?
Thank you for letting me bring this forward.
Okay, all right.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, we're on now to the district-to-district contract.
As you know, we've been working with Bentonville Valley for the last 3 years. They are transitioning into a more self-reliant model. They have hired a new superintendent and a new business manager that will start July 1. What they have asked us for is transitioning training services is probably the best way to describe it, to train their staff in software and various components of the financial operations going forward. It's not expected to be a great deal of time since they are hiring an experienced school business official from another district up north. What you have in front of you is an agreement that's been worked out between the two districts. They've already approved it. I'm just looking for a motion to authorize the chair to sign on behalf of the SU board.
so moved.
Second.
All right, let me read the motion. To authorize the SVSU Board Chair to sign the memorandum of agreement between BVSU and SVSU for training services provided in fiscal year 15.
That's correct.
Jim?
Just one comment on the agenda, is that number 5E calls for district-to-district contract, and it's a supervisory union to supervisory union contract. I would like the minutes to reflect
Yes,
that.
you're,
It's not, supervisory union is definitely not a district for the time being.
I think the terms are used interchangeably a lot through the state, but it would be
Incorrectly.
supervisory union to
is not a
supervisory
district,
union. But in
and
this
over
case,
my
that's
dead
what
body,
it
it'll
refers
become a
to.
district.
Does the resolution say district? Fran?
No,
It
no.
doesn't, no.
No, it
So
says,
it is supervisory
Supervisory
union
union
to
to
supervisory
Yeah.
union.
Yeah.
So it's just
The
the
motion is
description
correct.
on the
The minutes.
agenda.
That-
on the
that was
agenda, on
his
the
point.
agenda.
Yeah.
That was
Is
his point.
incorrect.
All right, there's been a motion and a second, correct?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor? Unanimous, okay, thank you. Okay. Next is the personnel, it's the administrative oversight for 2013-14, on
Yes.
point elementary.
Thank you. Sue McGuire, principal of the Mount Anthony Union High School, has been providing not only transitional assistance in changing the program that used to be called Plus at Congress Street to On Point to continue our division of the age groups at that site. We have moved the middle school students this past year to the middle school and have revised the program at the Congress Street site for elementary students, On Point Elementary, with an academic component as well as behavioral component. She continued that administrative oversight through the year. At the same time, Wendy Pierce was being appointed as interim special ed director, and Wendy's focus was on the improvements needed under the focus monitoring visit from the state. So it was helpful for us to have Sue McGuire continue working with the parents and giving oversight to Carrie Crosix, who's the head teacher at that site. What we're asking for this evening is a single payment of $5,000 to Sue McGuire for that service, which she provided throughout the year without precedent and not constituting any past practice. It's in recognition for the work that she has given. We intend to look at assigning that duty to a special ed administrator next year. Wendy and I are in conversation about that. As you know, we have the approval for 2 associate directors of special education. We'll be looking at those positions. We're also looking at Wendy's position herself as those 2 associate directors come on. So we're asking for that support this evening for that one-time payment.
I make a motion that we give Sue McGuire.
I'll read it anyway, but thank you. You made the motion, that's perfect. Okay, Leon, second. Motion is to issue a payment of $5,000 to Sue McGuire for administrative oversight of On Point Elementary during 2013-14 without precedent nor constituting past practice. All in favor?
Thank you.
Unanimous. Thanks. Okay, now we'll go to B, the position change, Coordinator of Early Education and Associate
Yes.
Director.
You've received an amended agenda with personnel item B, so that would be 6B, a position change from the vacancy that we have now called Coordinator of Early Child Education, to change that position to an Associate Director of Early Education. We also, as C on the agenda, have a job description of that Associate Director position. And as you'll see on the consent agenda, we have also a nomination. Karen, would you like to give a quick overview of why the change from Coordinator to Associate Director and the important responsibilities under the job description?
While we were in the process of recruiting applicants for the coordinator position, we started in February of this year. We went out twice for applicants, and actually we went through 3 application processes through School Spring. While we were going through that process, the legislature approved a bill called H-270, which is the new public pre-K bill, and that will take effect in the fall of, actually in, I should say, July 1 of 2015. We'll be planning for implementation in the fall. This will require school districts to provide public pre-K services for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Right now it's optional, and each of your boards have decided to provide those services. Woodford providing for 3- and 4-year-olds and all the rest for 4-year-olds, but now it will be required for 3-year-olds. So the work in the department will exponentially grow because of that requirement. In addition, our Title I audit had indicated that we needed to work on our transition services for children as they go into the public school system, and the Green Mountain Star plans that schools have also need to address the function of early childhood as an intervention strategy for our school, our supervisory union, as well as the transition and including parents. So there's multiple things converging for early childhood right now. In addition, we expect that we'll have more capacity out in the community. We do have more capacity now for our school-sponsored sites, and we need a level of employee that can assist with some of those added responsibilities at a level different than a coordinator. That would include, assisting with budgeting, supervision, evaluation, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be glad to answer any questions that anyone might have about that.
Okay. I'd like to do the job description, which is C, with this. I'll read a motion to approve the position change from Coordinator of Early Childhood Education to Associate Director of Early Childhood Education, and to approve the job description of Associate Director of Early Childhood Education.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Cindy and George. Any questions? Seeing none, okay, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we can do off-contract.
Grab my phone.
It's a D addition. So
Okay.
Fran, what we're doing is adding a 6D, which would be the off-contract employee increases for FY15 for SVSU staff. The budgeted amount for those increases is at 3%, which represents $79,621. The proposal is a 2.5% increase, which is a total of amount of money of $66,351 to be spread among 51 employees. And this would be done with satisfactory evaluations and no change to the insurance premiums.
Okay,
So moved.
okay. So the motion's going to be to approve a 2.5% increase for SVSU off-contract employees for fiscal year 15 with no change to contributions to insurance premiums and with satisfactory evaluations. Leon made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Larry, any questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay,
Thank you.
unanimous, thanks.
Thank you. Consent agenda.
Okay, next is a consent agenda.
We have the addition on the consent agenda of a nomination for Carol Egan as Associate Director of Early Childhood Education.
I make a motion, we approve it?
Approve the consent agenda.
Okay, and
Second.
Cindy seconded. Okay, any questions? Anything on the minutes? Warrants? Karen?
Could I just make a comment?
Sure.
You'll notice that Helen Brees is retiring from the Early Childhood
Yes, thank you.
Department. She's been there forever. It's going to be a huge loss. It's a time of transition, as we can see, for our department. I know that you say that people can be replaced, but I don't know. She's like the glue that holds everything together, and she has this incredible working memory for our whole department, keeps us all straight, including me. So it's going to be a real loss, so I just wanted to make sure we acknowledged her.
Perhaps the motion could include, with regret for Helen's, but for her retirement, good
Yeah.
wishes.
It's great for her. She'll have time for her grandchildren,
And
but
thank you, Helen.
yeah.
Then you said that, so that's
You really
good.
want to bury that in the consent agenda? Shouldn't we have a resolution
You can do a
outside?
separate if you'd like. So you should take the motion on the consent agenda, and then you can do a separate motion.
Okay, all right, all in favor, or wait a minute, we
wanna
already did,
take-
we already did the motion on the
Okay.
consent agenda.
Sorry.
And I forget who seconded, I thought Larry did, but,
I did.
okay, so we need,
As is.
all in favor of that motion, okay, unanimous. Okay, next.
Ray?
Me? Karen, you want to suggest some language?
I just spelled it out. I don't know. Richard, help us.
Richard's got it.
Richard will make it up. Just somebody make a motion.
The motion for,
Okay, we'll just make a motion to send our congratulations to Helen Brees
There you
on
go.
a long and very productive and supportive career in early childhood as she
Excellent.
retires from Molly Stark, and wish her good luck, have an enjoyable life, and please help us out when we can't remember what.
Second.
thank you, Ray, well
Ray.
said.
George seconded. Okay, all in favor?
Thank you, everyone, and
Unanimous.
thank you, Helen.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, all right, policies, Leon.
This is the nutrition and wellness policy
Right.
for warning.
That's all.
It's ready to be worn.
Make a motion that we warn 5156.
Second.
Okay, sure.
Fran, can I
Dave?
just, if we've got 2 or 3 minutes, I'm wondering if somebody, maybe Leon or somebody from the policy committee can.
Food Service Committee as well, Rick may be able to answer any questions as well.
Yeah, so specifically, and I, just looking through the changes in the preamble, or the introduction, there's language that's struck in the proposed revisions, that, I'll just read, with the object of promoting student health and reducing childhood obesity, the districts will establish nutrition guidelines for all foods available at the school during the day. So I'm wondering what the thought was into removing that language from the policy, particularly because this morning I was sitting at my desk and news came across from the World Health Organization saying that unhealthy diets are now a greater threat to global health than tobacco. So rather dramatic, but it made me think about this policy language, which I'd been reading the night before, and just wondered what the impetus was. And don't need to answer it now, but since it's going to be coming up.
Yeah, I can't remember the specifics on that specific sentence, but the general premise of the changes were to, actually, we were required to align this with the federal regulations. And we actually shortened the policy significantly and basically just referred to the federal regs that is required in order for us to participate in the National Free and Reduced Lunch Program. But I can look into why that, I don't, Dick or Leon, do you recall?
We did, that came from the committee.
Yeah.
The food service committee.
That
From the
food service committee
committee.
that looked at the regulations.
I mean,
that were being passed.
it doesn't look like, and I wasn't involved with it in the conversation, obviously, but it doesn't look like something was cut to satisfy, you know, a federal or a state
Yeah,
regulation.
I can't remember why that sentence was taken out.
It's not just that sentence either. There's other sections of the policy where language like that is removed.
Our original policy had a ton of information about how we prepare foods and specific kinds of foods that would be applied, and really, we get in trouble that way, and the intent of the policy was to meet the regulations. And some of those federal regulations have changed, and some of the wording was important.
I
We
don't
included
remember whether
legal
they went
references for that.
into the
Also.
the administrative regs part of that thing either, whether we moved them over there. We can send that on and we can look.
But I can actually, this hasn't been any of the local boards yet, has it? This is the first time out?
is the
This
first.
is the very
This is the
first
first.
warning, so it
Sorry?
won't, so it'll go to all the boards for
Well,
warnings.
I understand that, but what I'll do is I'll have a couple people that were more intimately involved in those corrections, be at our next SU meeting and explain them in detail. for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's an entire section on cafeteria guidelines. This may go to your point, Dick, that's been cut as well.
We cut a lot of stuff out of there that
Yeah.
just,
But we may not have to have the person come. He's asking the rationale behind the changes, and all of those changes were, that I know that we're talking about were done associated with the guidelines, I believe.
The federal guidelines.
Federal guidelines, so all we need to do is get those questions over, and they can come back and tell us, and to have a person
Okay.
come.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, are we required to cut this language to comply with the federal guidelines or state guidelines?
Or is it meant to be
Or is this a
encompassed
philosophical-
in some of the other language?
I
in
think
the
part of it was
policy?
philosophical in
Yeah.
that, you know, why create hurdles that we shouldn't have to create? Just refer to the federal regs, which change all the time anyway,
Yeah.
and prevent us from having to constantly be changing to meet the federal regs. If we refer to the federal regs, those are going to drive the decisions. That was the premise for most of it.
But we'll have them come.
Okay, so I'll read the warning again. It's to warn policy number 5156, student nutrition and wellness. I think we already had a motion and a second, so all in favor?
I have one little
Oh, I'm
comment
sorry, go
about
ahead,
language. On line
Oh, I
54,
liked it, that was perfect.
53, 54, it says,
No
whenever
more.
possible, lunch periods will
Exactly
be
what you said.
scheduled for after recess. I think you can take 4 out there, and it will read a lot better. That's just a little
An edit.
slight correction.
This is for warning anyway, so that's good. Thanks, Ray. Okay, all in favor of policy warning? Okay. Okay. Abstentions? Oh, Dave Durfee, abstention. Okay. Okay, superintendent's report.
So I wanted to bring the SVSU Board up to date on the Mosaic funding. I addressed the MAU board at their last meeting about this as well. We were not successful in getting a renewal of our 21st Century Learning Grant as we submitted it for another 5-year period. I wanted to make sure everyone knew that we've had that funding for 10 years. So this was our third application for that funding. Our ranking in the number of applications that were submitted was just below the fund line. So there are 3 categories that are given to the applications as they're read by the team that approves these. They either are described as a grant application to be funded. The next category is to be funded with conditions. And the last category is not to fund. We are the last in the ranking for to be funded with conditions. So had they had more money to distribute, we would have been funded. Now there's a 0 to 5% chance, it's very unlikely, not likely, but if any of the applications above ours do not meet their conditions for funding, then the money would be freed up and could come to us. Now, I've checked this out with the Agency of Education, Emmanuel Betts, who administers that program, and again, he said, Kathy, it is unlikely. So we are in the process of already starting to plan a grant application for next year for 5 years, and to structure our application so we'll get a higher point value. The Administrator Emmanuel Betts has confirmed that there will be a funding application for next year, so we know there is an application cycle that it's funded by the federal government that we can apply. The other thing is that we have very good technical assistance in that. 2 of the things that we need to add, which you'll hear as familiar, is that we must include summer programming and after-school programming in our school action plans as part of the fabric of what's required by Title I and the Green Mountain Stars. So very similar to early education. We're being really asked to look at compliance to federal regulations, of looking at the whole child and the whole school experience, not just the day of regular ed, the instruction of the school day itself, but to look at summer programming, after-school programming, transitioning of early ed into our schools, and really have it become the fabric. So that's an area of emphasis. We also need to provide more achievement data on our students that participate in the summer and after-school programming in that application, and we're starting to work on that already. As part of the application process, you actually need to submit your planning hours, and you get points on how many hours you've spent in planning the grant application. So the fact that we've started already working on our letter of intent, which is due in November, is very good. So what to do in the meantime? All of the principals at the former Mosaic sites, so that's Molly Stark, Bennington Elementary, Pownell, and the middle school, are already starting with what has been budgeted in your local budgets, as well as what's in Title I funding for summer programming, and MAU has budgeted an amount. They had the foresight to budget an amount should the grant not be accepted, so they have money in their budget as well for summer and after-school programming. We are in the process of putting together at Pownell and the middle school, the plans are much more developed than Molly Stark and Bennell at this time, but it looks like that we're well on our way to being able to offer a program at Pownell with additional support given by the Pownell board at their last meeting, Cindy, and at the middle school. So I'm expecting that the budgets and program for Molly Stark and Bennell will come in the next week, and we'll be sending out flyers and having people sign up. To go back to the Mosaic funding, the 21st Century Learning grant funding, it's based on percentage of poverty in your school for eligibility. So as we look at the grant that's being submitted for next year, we can look at adding additional schools that have 40% free and reduced lunch or above to that grant, but we also have to be careful that we're not, we have to be careful about the sustainability factor of continuing these programs after the 5 years, because there is a sustainability requirement that we be showing that not only our current federal grant funding and local funding, but donations that are made from area businesses or individuals to that can start to help sustain some of this. It's going to be looked at more closely in our next application. We already have the beginnings of a structure, and Rick is helping to put a structure together for receipt of such donations. So that's going to be an important part of our application as well. I can try to answer questions, Jim?
3 questions. I'll give you 3 questions. How much was the funding per year? In your opinion, why did we fail?
My opinion, what?
Why did we fail to get the funding? And then you imply a ranking, and I don't know, and I'm just looking for a number of, how many thousands applied and how many were granted?
Unfortunately, it wasn't thousands. I can get those numbers. I don't have them right now.
Where do we fall in as far as?
We fell in, there were 3 not to fund and 1 that we were at the bottom of the funding cycle that was fund with conditions. So there were 3 that were below us that were told we would not fund you at all.
In Vermont? Or?
In Vermont only, and it was, I think there were about 20 applications. So there were 3, my recollection is there were 3, not 4, 3 or 4 that were to fund fully, and the remainder in the center were to fund with conditions. So there are quite a number.
And how many were not funded out of the 20?
Pardon?
Out of the 20, how many were not funded?
3.
3, okay.
Yeah. Well, 4 counting us, because we didn't make that cutoff.
And how much was the money last year?
So the total budget for all 4 sites is about roughly $430,000. The grant is a half, 50% match, so it was $215,000. So, the local budgets have, MAU has $40,000 in their budget to contribute to this for the coming year. Benel, Molly Stark, and Pownell have $5,000 in their local budgets, and then we have.
7,500. Pownell has 7,500.
7,500, you've added some at your last meeting?
No.
You had 75 in the budget, and then you're looking to add some to that. And then in the title funding, we have 10,000 for each of the elementary schools in the budget.
Excuse me, were we given any reason why we were not funded?
Yes,
That's
I'll
my
tell you
question.
that it was predominantly showing the data for the achievement level of the students, so that's an area that we need to strengthen. And then sustainability effort, and there's a list I can give you. The other one was the
Including
transition,
in
the
action
fabric
plan.
of the school being, because when they came for their on-site, this is what's interesting, they came for an on-site visit just prior to the application submission. So they had, some of the readers were actually on the on-site visit, and in their on-site visits, some schools really were showing quite a lot of evidence that the after-school program was part of the fabric of the school. And then a couple of the schools, it was not felt that the fabric, that it was an after-school program and a summer program separated from the school program itself. So what the emphasis of 21st Century Learning Grants are is to make sure that student achievement is at the crux of the planning for summer and after school, and that it's integrated into the regular daily lessons that the school is giving in instruction. So it's quite hard to do. But in our program, we had lesson plans for each of the after-school programs that were linked to the curriculum, and we're going to have to do that with Common Core as well in the new application. So those are the major reasons.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Anybody else?
That's all I
Okay.
have.
All right. I do not. oh,
Fran,
okay.
I just
Go ahead,
wanted to
Joe.
thank those individuals that came to the retirement dinner for our retirees, sponsored each year by the SU, and to thank Ann Mook as well for her resolution at the legislature on recognizing all of those teachers. It was a wonderful dinner, and I thank you all for that we're able to attend.
Okay. I have no report, but I just want to mention, I think this is still on the legislative breakfast on June 2nd.
It
Is that
is.
still on? It is.
That is
Okay.
correct.
And that's at 7:45 at central office.
And we'll get that agenda out.
June 2nd.
June 2nd.
Next Monday.
7:45.
Yeah.
Okay. And any other?
Well, I just want to go back
Go ahead.
ask Dave the question, and as I started to look, went back to my notes and all the versions in terms of the changes. And all of the things that were stricken from that was to go in line with the guidelines, and we referenced the things in terms of 7 CFR 210 Appendix B and the 220 Appendix B. In addition to defining what campus was, in there at the bottom was the CFR 210.11A/4. So what we had in the policy was in duplication or conflict with those particular pieces, and it didn't make sense for us to keep citing those things in our policy when we reference them right here to be able to go along with that. That's what the rationale was behind those moves.
Thank you, Leon.
All right, good. Okay, next meeting is Wednesday, June 25th.
Unless we schedule a second one in
Right,
June.
well, that's true.
We may.
And then your FYI, the SVSU student enrollment, and the SVSU budget status report. Anybody else?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
all right, Cindy? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you for your support tonight.
Catherine?
This was the calmest meeting I've been to in 2 years.